This episode of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign is dedicated to Nan's mom, Ruth Ann, who passed away on June 9th, 2025. Nan's all-time favorite classic film is To Kill a Mockingbird, which she watched for the first time on television with her mom and siblings on a lazy summer evening in St. Paul, Minnesota. So in a way, Ruth Ann helped spark Nan's love of classic cinema. And I guess that means, well, Ruth Ann's kind of responsible for this podcast. Because the theme of this episode is bratty kids, Steve and Nan thought it the perfect episode to dedicate to Ruth Ann, since Nan could be, and sometimes still is, a bit of a brat.
All right, quiet on the set.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone, to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign podcast. Steve, a couple of weeks ago, I was texting you when I was watching a movie, as we will often do, right, at night?
Isn't that one of the greatest things about having a podcast is movies becomes like your job,
Yes.
but you get to text each other and say, did you see this? Did you see that?
Yes. And I was texting you about a film that we're going to talk about. The two stars of it are fabulous, but I was texting you about how awful the children were. And I don't mean their performances. I mean them as people. They were horrible children.
Yes, which kind of was the spark of this episode. We thought, hey, has anybody covered the bratty kids of classic cinema?
Yes. And of course, we know that the one film that comes to mind is The Bad Seed, right?
Oh, the ultimate bratty, psychotic child.
Right. But we're going to take a whole episode to discuss that film because you are friends with Patty McCormack.
Yes, and Patty will be on our show eventually, so we want to
Yes.
save Rhoda and the Bad Seed for our time with Patty.
But we will jump into some other films that we think really hit this mark of bad, bratty, evil, disturbed, however you want to phrase it. These are kids that will make you think they need a little discipline.
And after rewatching some of these movies with these bratty kids, it really reinforced my decision not to have children.
Well, there's that, right?
You never know what you're going to get.
I know, you never know. It's sort of like a rescue dog, right? But anyway.
Yes.
Well, can I start with this first film?
Yeah.
In fact,
absolutely.
This is the film that started the discussion of this episode. It's called There's Always Tomorrow, 1956, Universal Pictures. It's directed by the great Douglas Sirk, written by Bernard C. Schoenfeld, from a story by Ursula Parrott. Now, Ursula Parrott, very prolific writer, had 9 of her stories adapted into films, starting with The Divorcee, which, Steve, you saw at the TCM Festival.
Yes, so good.
And we're looking forward to talking in a future episode with the author of a book about Ursula Parrott called Becoming the Ex-Wife, The Unconventional Life and Forgotten Writings of Ursula Parrott, written by Marcia Gordon. So that's coming
Yes.
up. Now, this film is a remake of a 1934 film with Frank Morgan and Benny Barnes. Director Douglas Sirk was known for his soapy Technicolor melodramas, including Magnificent Obsession in 1954 and Imitation of Life in 1959, which we've talked about on this podcast. Now, this film is in black and white, and he really uses it in a way that, to my mind, sometimes feels almost film noir. I would be curious if you would agree with that, Steve, as a film noir expert.
Oh, absolutely. I think he definitely borrowed from the film noir style
Yes.
in this movie,
Yeah.
particularly.
Well, this stars Fred McMurray as Clifford Groves, who's a successful toy manufacturer who loves his family, but he is not feeling the love back, right? He is completely taken for granted by his wife, the wonderful Joan Bennett, and his 3 children, Vinny, played by William Reynolds, Ellen, played by Gigi Perreault, and Frankie, played by Judy Nugent. Essentially, McMurray's character is nothing more than the bill payer to his family. Feeling underappreciated and starved for attention, he ends up spending time with Norma Vale, played by Barbara Stanwyck. She's a former employee of his, yes, absolutely, who is now a successful designer in New York City, and she happens to be in town. Barbara has remained in love with Fred all these years, but even so, their relationship is still fairly innocent. When Fred's son, Vinny, sees them together in this innocent relationship, he immediately assumes that his father is having an affair, and he convinces his younger sister that Dad's having an affair. In fact, the only person that stands up for good old Dad is Vinny's fiance, which is kind of nuts, played by Pat Crowley in a very early role.
Yeah, that's right.
She says to Vinny, it's like you want him, your dad, it's like you want him to be guilty. And the rotten kid does. It's just nutty. Ultimately, the children's horrible behavior and unfounded suspicions, as well as Joan Bennett, her character putting the children before the marriage, throws Fred into Barbara's arms. And so the question is, toward the latter half of the movie, will Fred leave his family for Barbara? I'm not going to give away the ending, but with those awful children, you almost root for him to leave because...
Dump those brats, Fred.
So Stanwyck and McMurray, they made 4 pictures together. Remember the Night, we've talked about that one, 1940. Double Indemnity, obviously, 1944. They did a Western together, which I did not realize, called The Moonlighter, 1953, and then this film. With McMurray in this role of Clifford, you can see the beginnings of Steve Douglas, the dad McMurray played for 12 seasons.
You really can.
Yeah.
Great observation.
He really is like the My Three Sons character. He's so warm and likable, and, you just wish he would spank those children. Sorry for those people that don't believe in spanking. But I also have made my feelings very clear for Barbara Stanwyck. She can do no wrong. And here she embodies this sophisticated, smart, beautiful, independent woman. And she's ultimately the wisest person in the room. So you really root for her throughout. Just a couple of interesting things about this film. It's really rare for the man during this time period to be placed in the position of being taken advantage of. It's usually the woman, which I found one of the things I kind of really loved about the film. It's also rare having 3 leading actors in a film from the 1950s who are in their late 40s or 50s. In doing some research, Robert Osborne so wisely pointed out that during the 50s, the 1950s, that decade of filmmaking, there was more of a focus on much younger stars like Rock Hudson and Natalie Wood. So, I always love a picture where the focus is somebody over 40. So this was a great film for that reason as well. And then the wonderful character actors in this movie, Hal Smith, the town drunk on Andy Griffith, Helen Klebe, who we love, Paul Smith, who you're going to recognize from countless TV shows in the late 60s and 70s, and of course the great Jane Darwell. So lesson learned from this film, kids, don't take your father's or your mother's for granted. This film, There's Always Tomorrow, is streaming on Amazon Prime.
Great choice.
Thank you.
Love it.
What you got?
Well, for my first choice, I am choosing one of my favorite movie brats, and it's Jane Withers.
Oh, love her.
Probably not the most obvious choice because Withers often played the plucky, funny, good girl, but... anybody who's ever seen the film Bright Eyes, my God. In this film, we have the oh-so-good Shirley Temple, the light, bright, good girl. She plays this poor daughter of a maid to this wealthy, cruel family. And she is constantly belittled, berated, and antagonized by the family's incredibly evil and obnoxious daughter, who is ironically named Joy. Played by Jane Withers.
I love it.
I mean, this child is horrible. Well, the only light for Shirley in this situation is the family's cranky millionaire Uncle Ned, played by Charles Selin. He takes a liking to Shirley's character, and he nicknames her Bright Eyes.
Oh.
Well, when Shirley's mother unexpectedly dies, leaving her an orphan, the family, of course, decides to ship little Shirley off to an orphanage, but Uncle Ned is not having this one bit. Shirley then runs away, and she sneaks onto the airplane of a guy named Loop Merritt. Great name. And this was one of Shirley's dad's aviator friends, and he's played by the great James Dunn. Loop and his fiancée, played by Judith Allen, they love Shirley, and they actually want to adopt her. Well, when Uncle Ned learns that Shirley has run away, he goes crazy on his nephew and his wife for being so cruel to her. And he then tells them if anything's happened to Shirley, he is cutting them off financially, right? So realizing that Shirley's now their continued meal ticket, they make a move to try to adopt her, although they don't really want her. Well, then Loop comes in and he challenges the adoption and he says, I want to adopt her. And this culminates in this huge dramatic custody trial, which is really cool. And in the end, Loop, his fiance, and Uncle Ned all decide to raise Shirley together. And they were all going to move in together and raise little Shirley. So happy ending for everyone except for the evil, cruel, wealthy family, because they're not wealthy anymore because Uncle Ned has taken the money and gone off with Shirley.
So they get their just rewards.
They get their just rewards. And the best part is after the trial's over and the judge has made his ruling, as they're leaving the courtroom, Jane Withers' character says, "Oh, Papa, now we don't have to be nice to Uncle Ned anymore." Her mother then turns and slaps the shit out of this child and drags her out of that courtroom crying. It's the perfect ending to this movie. It is one of the best slaps in film history, and you can almost hear a collective cheer from the audience.
I love it. I love it.
I know. Great movie. It's not only the movie that Shirley Temple sings on the good ship Lollipop, but it also features Toto from The Wizard of Oz as her pooch, and it features Jane Darwell as the kindly cook to the family. But for all Shirley Temple's goodness, to me, it was Jane Withers' badness that stands out the most in this film. It's great.
Talk about your dark and light, right? It's right up your alley, my friend.
Totally. We got the light in Shirley. We got the dark in little Jane.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's streaming. I think you can see it on YouTube, actually.
That's great. That's great. I love that choice. I love it. My next choice is The Secret Garden, 1949, directed by Fred M. Wilcox, screenplay by Robert Ardrey, based on the novel by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is a story that's been adapted numerous times, including the 1993 film version, executive produced by Francis Ford Coppola, and a Broadway musical that originally ran from 1991 to 93 with music by Lucy Simon, who, by the way, is the great Carly Simon's sister, and book and lyrics by Marcia Norman, who has quite her own pedigree as a playwright and having famously written the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Night Mother. This 1949 version of The Secret Garden stars Margaret O'Brien as Mary Lennox. Living in India, Mary's parents die of cholera, and the orphan girl is brought to Yorkshire to live with her wealthy uncle, who's played by Herbert Marshall, and his son Colin, played by Dean Stockwell, who is confined to his bed. This is a young Dean Stockwell, obviously. In this version, in my opinion, Margaret O'Brien and Dean Stockwell actually tie in terms of who is the worst child. Although Dean Stockwell ends up being slightly ahead in the brat race, I think, and we'll get to that. Both are spoiled rotten, and they both rule the roost. In this case, it's a 100-room mansion on the moors. Yes, Margaret O'Brien's character lost her parents, but from the opening scene of her playing with dozens of dolls, you're pretty sure that she was allowed to have whatever she wanted when her parents were alive. And yes, Dean Stockwell's mother died in childbirth, and sure, he can't walk, so he thinks, but his temper tantrum midway through this film, it's truly epic. These two broken little souls are eventually mended through finding the secret garden, a place that Dean Stockwell's mother, since deceased, cared for, and that Dean, Margaret, and Dickon, the sweet servant boy, helped to restore. Now, how Dickon, this little angel, this poor little boy, can be friends with these two, it's truly amazing. But all kidding aside, I really do love Margaret O'Brien and Dean Stockwell's performances in this film. There's nothing I hate worse than a precocious child actor. And sorry, Margaret O'Brien, she could sometimes be a little too precocious to me. They each have those moments.
Sacrilege.
I know, right? Ooh, I hope she's not listening. They do each have their moments in this script of that dictated, by what the writing is, but they really also tug at our hearts because we see them healing from their brokenness and becoming best friends with Dickon. And that's a transformation I love in any story. Somebody's broken and something heals them, and there's redemption in their life. It ultimately also warms the frigid waters of Uncle/Dad Herbert Marshall. This version of The Secret Garden, to my mind, has a much darker edge to it than other Secret Gardens. It kind of reminded me of a more Jane Eyre-ish kind of tone, which I really loved. The film is shot in black and white, and the garden scenes are in full Technicolor, which is really incredible in creating that magical effect of the garden and the effect it has on everyone. This was actually Margaret O'Brien's last film for MGM. As we all probably know, she was one of MGM's most popular child stars of the 40s, along with Elizabeth Taylor, who actually, I think she sounds and even looks like a young Elizabeth Taylor in this picture. She's very reminiscent of her.
Yes, I could see that. Absolutely.
She was the ripe old age of 12 when she made this film, and she was no longer deemed adorable by the studio. So her contract was not renewed, and on the cusp of adolescence, she found herself to be considered a has-been, which is just, don't let your kids go into showbiz.
That is harsh.
Yeah, it really is.
You're not cute, kid. Get out.
The character of Dickon, who is supposed to be around the same age as Marion Collin, around 10 years old, the actor who portrayed him, Brian Roper, he was actually around 20 years old when he filmed this. Margaret O'Brien and Dean Stockwell were also a little bit older than their characters. And speaking of Stockwell, what a career. He had already racked up at this point in his life a dozen or so film credits. And he's one of those rare actors that he was not only a successful child actor, he went on to have an extremely successful film and television career, including David Lynch's Blue Velvet, 1986, and one of my favorite TV shows, CBS's Quantum Leap from 89 to 93, among many other credits.
He was so good in Quantum Leap.
He was so good. Other actors to look out for: Norma Varden from Strangers on a Train and The Housekeeper and The Sound of Music, Gladys Cooper, who I love as Mrs. Medlock, Elsa Lanchester as Martha, and Reginald Owen as Ben Weatherstaff, Aubrey Mather as Dr. Griddlestone. Again, love these names. He has a very funny scene with none other than Jimmy the Crow. And
Jimmy makes another appearance.
It involves a toupee. I won't give it away. And then finally, George Zucco, who you may remember from, it played Professor Moriarty in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And he usually would play a bad guy, and he plays a very sympathetic character in this film. This is available to watch free on Internet Archive.
Great choice, and what a cast. My gosh.
Isn't it amazing? Before we get to our next choices, Steve, it's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
So today's pop quiz question of the day, probably the most evil child performance ever captured on film, and we just were talking about her, was Patty McCormick as Rhoda Penmark in The Bad Seed, 1956. This started as a Broadway play, and Patty actually originated the role when she was only 8 years old. The question is, what is the main difference between the play's ending and the ending of the film version?
Oh, that's a great question, and we will have the answer and more Bratty children in classic cinema after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Hey, have you ever heard of the Academy Juvenile Award, also known informally as the Juvenile Oscar? Yeah, it was a special honorary Academy Award bestowed at the discretion of the Board of Governors at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Now, the idea was to specifically recognize juvenile performers under the age of 18 for their, quote, outstanding contributions to screen entertainment. And the very first one of those was at the 7th Academy Awards, given to an actress we're talking about in this episode, a 6-year-old Shirley Temple. That was for her work in the motion pictures of 1934. The award continued to be presented intermittently over the next 26 years to a total of 12 child actors and actresses. The very last one presented at the 33rd Academy Awards to a 14-year-old Haley Mills. That was for her performance in 1960's Pollyanna. The trophy itself was a miniature Academy Award statuette standing at an estimated 7 inches tall. That was about half the height of the standard 13.5-inch tall Oscar trophy. And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we get further into old Hollywood's greatest brats, we're going to give a big shout out to our listener of the week. And this week, we are honoring Risa Cantu and her adorable dog, Rowan. Risa and I just met while walking through Beechwood Canyon, and she actually recognized my voice from the podcast.
I love this
Risa,
story.
I love that you stopped me. I'm so happy that we met. I'm looking forward to giving you a little tour of Beechwood Canyon a little bit later. And thank you for all the support you've been giving us and all the love you've shown us. You are our listener of the week.
Thank you, Risa, and thank you, Rowan.
Thanks, Risa.
Oh, Rowan's the cutest.
All right.
Myrna was in love.
I bet. All right, Steve, you're up. What you got?
When I think of brats in old Hollywood movies, one that comes to mind first and foremost is probably Bonita Granville in These Three from 1936.
Oh, yeah.
Now, of course, These Three was the film adaptation of Lillian Hellman's powerful play, The Children's Hour, which centered on 2 young women, played here by Merle Oberon and Miriam Hopkins, who are longtime friends and who are running a boarding school for women. Well, everything's pretty hunky-dory until this vile little vengeful brat named Mary Tilford is caught lying and she's punished. Well, she begins to retaliate against the headmistresses by spreading these horrible rumors about the women. These rumors eventually destroy the school and the women's lives. A little bit about the rumor in the filmed version, because of the Hays Code and morality, they couldn't really address the real scandal, which was the rumor was about lesbianism. Instead, they made it about one of the women's boyfriends was supposedly having an affair with the other woman. So that was the big scandal, which doesn't seem even that scandalous anymore.
Right, not these days.
Yeah, but of course they couldn't touch a lesbian theme back then. Mary, of course, played so brilliantly by Bonita Granville, was absolutely astonishing in this role. She's able to portray such cold, calculating evil while still managing to present this sense of almost faux innocence. It's just this weird dichotomy, and she does it so beautifully. Actually, film critic Leonard Maltin described her performance as restrained, genuinely chilling, praising her ability to deliver a powerful performance without being too over the top. Which is, I think, a very fair assessment of her performance.
I would agree.
Bonita Granville, people don't know a lot about her. She had a very interesting life that included several distinct phases. You know, she was born in New York in 1923. Her parents were both vaudeville performers. She began her career on stage when she was only 3 years old, and she made her film debut at age 9 in Westward Passage in 1932, which starred Laurence Olivier and Anne Harding. She followed this up with a small role in Cavalcade, 1933, which went on to win the Best Picture Oscar. But it was these three that really put her on the map. I mean, she's just astonishing. You know, she went on to do, movies like 1937's The Maid of Salem, which starred Claudette Colbert and Fred McMurray. Again, she gets to play a brat in this one because she's this puritanical woman who starts this whole rumor about witches. So she is quite the rumor mill kind of gal.
Yeah, she's got that down.
She does. She went on to appear as a very delightful, lovely daughter in a wonderful comedy that I love called Call It a Day, 1937. She's the daughter of Frida Enniscort and Ian Hunter and the sister of Olivia de Havilland. She's so good in this one, you almost forgive her for all the evil roles she played.
I have not seen that film. I want to see that.
It's so good, and she's so great in this. She keeps working steady. She's in movies like It's Love I'm After, 1937, with Betty Davis, Leslie Howard, and Olivia de Havilland. Merrily We Live, 1938, with Constance Bennett and Brian Ahern, and White Banner, 1938. And this was the film that actually won Faye Bainter her Academy Award.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, great movie. And she even leaned back into her former bratty persona in the funny film The Beloved Brat, 1938, playing, you guessed it, the title character. Then she went into the next phase of her career where she was handpicked by Warner Brothers to play the famed girl detective Nancy Drew in a series of very popular, successful movies. These included Nancy Drew Detective in 1938, Nancy Drew Reporter, 1939, and Nancy Drew and the Hidden Staircase, 1939 also. She continued to grow as an actress, and she turned in polished performances in a great movie, The Glass Key, 1942, with Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. Now Voyager, 1942 also, with Betty Davis and Paul Henreid. And in the kind of bizarre exploitation film Hitler's Children, 1943.
Yeah.
So by the mid-1940s, she seemed to be floundering a bit. I think, again, like most kids, you go through that awkward stage and it really hurts your career. She appeared in a couple of Andy Hardy movies and a very uninspiring movie called Youth Runs Wild, and as a juvenile delinquent in Breakfast in Hollywood, 1946. Things changed for Bonita Granville both professionally and personally when she made the film The Guilty, which was this nifty little film noir from 1947. And it was on set that she met the film's producer, Jack Rather. He was this Texas oil millionaire turned producer, which Texas millionaires tend to become producers. I don't know why. It was just the times, I guess. It was love at first sight, and they were soon married. They had a couple of kids, and her career really shifted gears at that point because she really stopped emphasizing her acting career, and she really got into producing because her husband was a producer, and he ended up purchasing the rights to all the characters for both The Lone Ranger and Lassie.
Wow.
So Granville played a very pivotal role in developing these productions in the long-running popular TV series. She served as an associate producer and later an executive producer, and her contribution to these series were instrumental in their success. She returned to acting periodically, mostly in TV, but by the 1950s, she was just mainly focusing on producing and her charitable works, which were many. She was also a very savvy businesswoman. At one point, and this is really cool, she co-owned the Disneyland Hotel and the Queen Mary.
Wow.
I know, kind of cool.
Yeah.
It really demonstrated her entrepreneurial spirit, I think.
Yeah. Smart lady.
Yeah, and her dedication to the arts extended to her public service life too. She served on the John F. Kennedy Center Board of Trustees. She was appointed by Presidents Nixon and Reagan to that appointment, and her contributions to the arts were recognized with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960, and she was posthumously named a Disney legend in 2011.
Lovely.
Yeah, in 1988, Granville passed away from lung cancer at the age of 65, but her legacy endures throughout her contributions to film, television, and the arts, as well as through the continued operation of the Disneyland Hotel and other ventures that she helped establish.
Yeah. Wow. What a
Pretty cool life.
That's an amazing life, and I did not know that about her. That's really fabulous.
I think her life outside of films was almost more interesting than her film life.
Yes, definitely surpassed her acting career. Wonderful. Great choice, Steve. My last one is Lord of the Flies, 1963, directed by Peter Brook, based on the book written by William Golding. However, no screenplay credit was given to this film. It does say written by William Golding, but because Peter Brook threw out much of the script and encouraged the young cast to improvise, there's nobody listed a screenplay by. Brook, of course, was one of the greatest stage directors of the 20th century. We're talking theater, as well as his innovative Shakespearean productions and his influence in the development of avant-garde theater. Now, have you read this book, Steve? Did you have to read it? Was it required reading?
I did not have to read it, and I've actually never read it.
Okay, it's just a haunting book. I remember just not being able to put it down. And it's considered one of the most analyzed novels of the 20th century, right up there with To Kill a Mockingbird. The story goes, a group of British schoolboys on an airplane escaping nuclear attack in England crash on a remote, uninhabited island. They quickly establish a young leader in a character named Ralph, played by James Aubrey, who sets up rules to aid in their being rescued. But this system quickly falls apart. The young men think there's a monster at the top of the hill. It ultimately divides them into two groups, one that follows the rules and one that resorts to savagery. The character of Ralph says, to no avail, "You're breaking the rules, and the rules are the only thing we got." So that's a real foreshadowing of what's going to happen in this story. However, this monster that they think is at the top of the hill, it isn't real. They've created an enemy that doesn't exist out of fear and ignorance, and this is what brings these characters to their basest and most animalistic behavior. They slaughter one boy and try to offer up another as a sacrifice to the imagined monster. Separated from civilization and the norms of their society, their true nature comes out. Some of these boys have more reason and heart than others, but they really, each of them have something to tell us about bad behavior and how awful we human beings can be. And we all can be awful. You know,
yes, we can.
Lindsay's family has sort of a mantra, in a crisis, we all revert to type. And watching this film, you quickly identify the different types of human nature personified in these boys. It's certainly a cautionary tale, especially in the times that we live in now. If we don't have empathy for each other, if we resort to only caring about what me wants, instead of we are capable of destroying each other and the world that we live in. Fun facts about this story: the novel unfolds over several weeks, but the film actually allegedly covers only a few days. Peter Brook shot over 60 hours. That's 60 hours of footage.
Wow.
Which was then edited down into a 90-minute film. Can you imagine being that editor? The finished movie was given an X certificate by the British Board of Film Censors, so none of the boys who were in the film could see it when it went to the theaters.
Oh, wow.
Two of the boys in this film went on to pretty established acting careers. James Aubrey, who I mentioned, played Ralph. He unfortunately passed away in 2010. He had a nice career. And Nicholas Hammond, who plays Robert, he was Friedrich, and one of the Von Trapp family.
Friedrich.
Yes, one of the Von Trapp children in The Sound of Music. He also played Sam Wanamaker in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he's fabulous in that role.
He really is.
This film was remade in 1990. I have never seen that version, but this original is quite wonderfully disturbing in a good way, in a way that makes us examine who we are as human beings.
Sometimes we need to be disturbed.
I think so.
You know, I think we get so complacent that it's nice to have it shaken up a little bit. I love what you said earlier. You know, we've got to get away from the me and get back to the we. Beautifully stated.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's streaming on many services, so check it out.
Great choice. It makes me want to go read read the book.
Yeah. Oh,
I can't
it's
believe
such a good book.
got through college without having to read
it's such
it.
a good book. Yeah.
For my final favorite brat from the movies, I'm going to leave the 1930s where I've been living.
Okay.
And I'm going to jump all the way to the 1971 fantasy film, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, one of my favorite all-time films.
Of course, we all love the movie. It starred Gene Wilder as a mysterious candy factory owner who invites 5 specially chosen children to take a special tour of the factory. And boy, this movie is the motherlode of brats. I mean, there's so many to choose from. Where do you start?
Where do you start? Where do you start?
I know. Well, one of the kids, Charlie, who's played by Peter Ostrom, he's the good guy. He has a pure heart. He's good. He's great. The other 4, no. Was there ever a more rotten group of kids in one movie?
No.
I mean, seriously.
No, you have picked the motherlode.
Yeah, it's the motherlode. You have Veruca Salt, played by Julie Dawn Cole. She's this bossy girl who's so entitled, it just knows no bounds. Then you've got Violet Beauregard, played by Denise Nickerson, and she's this obnoxious, competitive, gum-smacking brat. And then there's a gluttonous, food-obsessed Augustus Gloop, played by Michael Bolner, and the TV-obsessed and violence-prone Mike Teavee, played by Paris Themin, who probably grew up with a little too much violence in his life.
Yeah.
There's so many to choose from, but for this episode, I'm going to focus today on Denise Nickerson, who played horrible, horrible Violet.
Yes, I love her.
Besides being obnoxiously competitive, and after all, she was the bubblegum blowing champion somewhere, for God's sake.
Right.
She is this pushy, entitled little brat who has an equally pushy and obnoxious mother. So the apple didn't fall far from the tree in this situation. She ends up getting her comeuppance when she ignores the warning of Willy Wonka and she chews this experimental gum that causes her to swell up like a balloon and turn purple like a giant human blueberry.
Yes. It's such a great scene.
Oh, it's such a great scene, and I love her in this. And they eventually have to roll her out, and somewhere off camera, they have to squeeze her back to normal.
Yes. Oh.
And Denise Nickerson was so memorable in this role. I mean, she just played it to the hilt. She was such a seasoned pro and just so good. And personally, of all the kids, I found her to be the most memorable. She was the one that I love to hate the most. And that's my criteria, I think, for picking her.
I think it's a good one for picking the kids in these films, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A little bit about Denise Nickerson. She was born April 1st, 1957 in New York, and her father was a mailman. Her mother worked in an office. And after the family moved to Miami, she got into showbiz through a friend of the family, Broadway theater producer Zev Buffman. And he got her booked into a couple of commercials, and then she did a stage production of Peter Pan with Betsy Palmer playing Peter Pan. She played Wendy Darling's daughter, Jane. When Buffman took the play, Peter Pan, on the road, he brought Denise Nickerson with him. So she got to do a run of a show, which was really cool for this young girl. And it really kind of got her established in the entertainment business. After that, her parents moved back to New York City, and she joined the cast of the gothic soap opera Dark Shadows in 1968.
Right.
Anybody remember that one?
I remember that one, but I don't remember her in it.
Well, in Dark Shadows, she actually played multiple characters, including Amy Jennings and Nora Collins. Her versatility and her talent were pretty evident, and she navigated the complexities of this TV series. So then in 1971, she was 13 when she got cast as the nymphette Lolita Hayes, replacing the original actress in the ill-fated musical Lolita, My Love.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know there was a musical of Lolita?
I didn't. I'm so sad I missed it.
I know. Well, it opened in Boston and it closed in Boston. So
enough
it
said.
never reached Broadway.
Right.
Well, Denise Nickerson, she began working in television quite a bit. She worked on TV shows like Flipper and Search for Tomorrow, The Brady Bunch,
Yes.
she's even in that, and the PBS children's series, The Electric Company, which I think a lot of us loved growing up. I know I did. Where she was a member of the singing group known as the Short Circus. Her role in The Electric Company showcased her musical talents, and it further endeared her to audiences. And I think that's what really got her chosen to play in Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Now, in 1975, she was cast as Shirley Tolsky, and we've talked about this movie. It's one of my absolute favorites from the 1970s. Shirley Tolsky is a young woman competing in the Young American Miss Beauty pageant as Miss San Diego in the dark satirical comedy Smile from 1975.
Love it.
Great movie, and she's so good in this. Smile, of course, was directed by Michael Ritchie, and it starred Bruce Dern and Barbara Feldon as the adults, and it featured future stars like Annette O'Toole, Joan Prather, Melanie Griffith, Maria O'Brien, and Colleen Camp as the fellow contestants. Well, Nickerson showed really great comic skills in Smile. She's fantastic in the scene where she finally drives the musical director, played to perfection by William Traynor, to the brink of madness with her terrible off-key rendition of this seasonal theme song. You have to see it to really get it. But she's so funny, so good. Later on in 1978, she was really wonderful in the movie 0 to 60, which starred Darren McGavin, Sylvia Miles, and Joan Collins. In this one, she plays a plucky 16-year-old car repo expert. Really fun performance in there. She had a successful run in film and TV, and she made the decision at age 21 to retire. Maybe smart girl.
Yes, right.
She really focused her career on healthcare, where she went on to nursing school, but she didn't finish, and she ended up working as a receptionist and office manager for several medical offices. In later years, she occasionally reunited with her former co-stars from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, participating in reunions and interviews that celebrated the film's enduring popularity. She also made appearances in documentaries about Dark Shadows and Willy Wonka, reflecting on her time there. After suffering a mild stroke in 2018, Nickerson's health began to deteriorate. She tried to end her suffering with an overdose of sleeping pills, but she was unsuccessful. On July 10th, 2019, Denise Nickerson passed away at the age of 62. She's survived by her son from her second marriage, and now her legacy continues through her memorable roles and the joy she brought so many people during her short career.
Oh, that's a sad ending. I did not know that about her. What a wonderful talent.
I know, and she was really talented.
Really
had a
was.
flair for comedy.
Well, I have loved all of these choices, and I'm just going to have to go back and watch some Willy Wonka, because who doesn't? That story always lifts you up, right?
Exactly. I love it.
Steve, what is the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz?
Well, the question was, in the Broadway version of The Bad Seed, the ending is very different from the film version. What's the difference? Well, in the Broadway version, Patty McCormick's character, Rhoda Penmark, really kind of gets away with it in a weird way. Whereas in the movie version, she definitely gets her comeuppance when a bolt of lightning strikes her dead, as it should.
Yes,
I must prefer the film version.
They actually should have given God a credit at the end of that film, right?
I know.
It's like she gets her comeuppance.
Taking out the trash.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, this has been so much fun. We would love it if you listeners would give us a 5-star review and also follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube with the handle @FromBeneathTheHollywood Sign.
And we'd love to hear about who are some of your favorite old movie brats. So email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.